This is a game with many names. Wikipedia uses the phrase triangular peg solitaire to differentiate it between this version and a similar game played in England and other parts of Europe, with pieces placed in a sort of cross pattern, typically referred to there as simply solitaire. Myself, I typically call it the peg game, or the golf tee game, or the cracker barrel peg game more frequently, and that's what I'm going to be using for the course of this video, because I only play this game when I'm eating at a Cracker Barrel restaurant. Officially, according to the game board, it's entitled the Jump All But One game. Or rather, Jump All But One games, implying, I guess, that this was a part of a series of Jump All But One games, I suppose the others of which have been lost to time and history. Others call it Last Man Standing, Tricky Triangle, and in one case I've seen it called the Original IQ Tester, an idea that is reflected in the sort of poem engraved on the wooden triangle that makes up the game board. Jump each tee and remove it. Leave only one, you're genius. Leave two, and you're pretty smart. Leave three, and you're just plain dumb. Leave four or more, and you're just plain ignoramus. This is a fascinating game to me because it is a game of circumstance. You know, I remember I had a friend in junior high who would ask people a question of, what's the first joke that you ever remember hearing? This was like a common thing he would do. And truthfully, I couldn't remember, still really can't very well, but I remember thinking that this was a sort of revealing question. You know, probably a question with more psychological depth than I would expect a seventh grader to be asking people. Anyway, I think of this question sometimes with regards to games, to myself, not just video games, because I'm pretty sure I know what my first video game was. It was either Duck Hunt or Sonic the Hedgehog, and I know that my child's first game is going to be Sewer Shark. But I'm talking about games in general, I don't remember that for certain either, personally, but one of the first that I can remember was the Cracker Barrel peg game. I've probably not been to a Cracker Barrel restaurant more than maybe 50 times in my life, and probably not more than 10 since I turned probably 15 or 16. It used to be a lot more common than it is now, because when we were kids, my parents would have our grandparents stay with us, and they would take us out to eat sometimes, and we would go to Cracker Barrel sometimes. But that's gone down over the years, after I got older, after we got into high school, and we've kind of seen less of them ever since, at least in that context. And since that time, I almost never go to a Cracker Barrel, with the lone exception of this one in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. My other grandparents live in central Minnesota, and we drive up Interstate 29 from Kansas City to Brookings, South Dakota, and then we head east in order to get there. Generally, we end up in Sioux Falls in the early afternoon, and sometimes we stop at this Cracker Barrel on the way up. We've done that even less in the past 5 years, basically since 2015 when we got our current dog, because he's very social and he likes other dogs quite a lot, and a lot of other dogs live near my grandparents' house. So he likes going up there and visiting in a way that the dog that we had before him didn't, because she wasn't very social. So we typically have her stay at a dog daycare place, just have somebody stay at the house to watch her, so we could take, a 30 minutes to an hour to stop at the Cracker Barrel and eat with no dog. But now that we have Teddy coming with us most of the time, we only stop at fast food places with outdoor seating, because we don't want to leave him alone in the car, because that's not a good thing to do to a dog. So though I barely noticed it happening, and I'm not very broken up about it, both avenues of going to Cracker Barrel have effectively disappeared from my life, and as a result, I don't play the Cracker Barrel peg game too often anymore. I don't think I had honestly played the Cracker Barrel peg game since 2015. It's not that I couldn't have. I'm sure I could have walked into one of the stores. I live within walking distance of a Cracker Barrel, and I could have just bought one there. They sell them like shrink wrapped in their little store. Or I could have even, I'm sure, played a facsimile of it online somewhere, some flash game website. But I don't personally care that much about playing peg solitaire of any sort. I only have the impetus to do it when it's literally on the table in front of me at a Cracker Barrel restaurant. However, this summer, due to outside circumstances too esoteric to put into this video, I do have some standards. We decided to leave Teddy at home with my boy Mike. Good hands, trustworthy guy. And that gave us time to stop at the Sioux Falls Cracker Barrel restaurant. Immediately as I sat down, I reached for the Cracker Barrel peg game, and it hit me upon starting to play it a little bit, that I had not played the Cracker Barrel peg game in 6 years, since 2015. And the last time that I had played the Cracker Barrel peg game was at that specific Cracker Barrel in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 6 years prior. Now, I'm no better and no worse at the Cracker Barrel peg game than I used to be. I acknowledge this game is very well solvable. It's not hard to find the method with which one can do so online, but I have no desire to completely solve this game that I almost never play. So when I try to play it, I typically do poorly to begin with, play mostly randomly off whims of what feels good at the moment, and sometimes I do well, and sometimes I do worse. Oftentimes I end up with that infamous ignoramus status, leaving 4, 5, 6 pegs in the little board. But the end point of playing the game to fill time between visits from the waitstaff is fulfilled. I have a sort of positive nostalgia about it, I'm sure, but really this game is more so like something so commonplace that I don't even really notice it. In my mind, this game occupies that specific place and that specific event of driving up north on I-29 that a lot of other small things about that drive do. We tend to stop at the same rest areas, typically, and though I'm only ever there once yearly, I remember it was the same me who was there last year and the year before and the year before. There are little landmarks that are like that. There's a particular gas station in the middle of a small town in South Dakota that's like that. There's inevitable construction in Sioux City, Iowa that we always have to drive through, and in some ways, there's the Cracker Barrel peg game. And as I think about it, there are, or at least there were a few games that have this sort of conditional interest to me. There was a machine for Data East's Karate Champ that used to be at a pizza place I would frequent in the city I lived from 2015 to 2017. Normally I wouldn't play Data East's Karate Champ, but whenever I was there I would play on that machine. There was the Top Skater machine at an arcade at Worlds of Fun in Kansas City, Missouri, which is a theme park that I used to visit every summer, and once every summer I would try to play the Top Skater machine. Even recently, there used to be a booth with Rocket League set up at San Diego's Petco Park, and me and the same friend Mike used to have something of a tradition where we would play Rocket League whenever we went to Padres games in 2018 and 2019 before we went to our seats. I don't know if that's still there at this point. I used to play Castlevania Circle of the Moon only on airplanes, but that is one of the most frustrating games to play only on airplanes, and I've since stopped doing that. That's one of the most frustrating games to play, period, let alone with months apart between the one time and the next time that you play it. These are games that I only play under certain circumstances, oftentimes months, oftentimes years apart, and it always makes me contemplate this question of who the last version of me to play that game was. How is he different from me? How is he similar to me? What have I learned since then? What's changed since then? And I like to leave a lot of things like that in their places. Typically, I don't even realize that I'm doing this until I've done it naturally a few times. And I didn't think about how this happened with the Cracker Barrel peg game until I was within arm's reach of it in Sioux Falls this summer. 6 years prior, I had inhabited the same dining room in the same restaurant and played the same game. Maybe even the exact same game, and maybe the same game board that I had used 6 years prior. I don't know how often they throw them out. But never between. That was an unbroken era of 6 years that I didn't know I was starting when I left that restaurant in 2015 and didn't really think about how I was ending when I entered back into that same restaurant in 2021, during which I never played this game. That's an insignificant thing, but it's still a real thing. And when that came to an end, it got me to think, how different am I, this current 26-year-old, from that 20-year-old in 2015? But how similar as well? After all, regardless of how different we've become in those 6 years, the 4 apartments, 3 cities, 2 degrees, and 1 horrible, horrible year that came all too close to severing that timeline completely, I immediately reached for the same game both times.